maybe I won't. Oh, I already am. All right. So this is our virtual session that's going to bring together folks who are coming here to Puerto Rico for in-person sessions and for folks who are not able to make it out here to Puerto Rico. So I'm very excited that we have such a great group of folks who are going to be able to talk today. And that's not just our panelists, that's also our attendees. We're going to give some time for everybody to chime in. Definitely use the chat function as much as you'd like. And if you need to, you can send me direct messages. But yeah, for those who don't know me and Travel Unity, my name is Roni Weiss. I'm the executive director. We have been around since 2016, and everything we do is around making the world of travel more welcoming to people of all backgrounds and identities. Yeah, that's what we're talking about today. How do we make sure that travel is a space where people who work in this world feel like they're valued, where people who are visiting places feel like they belong when they're there, and where we make sure that communities can get a positive impact from all of this tourism work. I would love to thank our partner in this session, Amanda Charles, and Caribbean Tourism Organization. Amanda, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words about what CTO is doing around DEI and about the session that CTO ran just a little bit ago.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you all for joining. And a special thanks to Roni at Travel Unity for really bringing this topic to our attention. Certainly, I extend greetings from the Caribbean Tourism Organization. We are an interregional organization that supports and promotes the sustainable development of tourism. And as the sustainable tourism specialist, you know, when we think of sustainability, it really includes three pillars, you know, care for the environment, social and cultural equity, and the third pillar would speak to, in the Caribbean context, resilience broadly. So today we're looking at one of the social pillars in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion, how it impacts the visitor experience, and what provisions should be in place for tourism employees. DEI in tourism seeks to foster a welcoming and respectful environment for both employees and visitors. From the perspective of employees, it entails providing cultural sensitivity training, equal opportunities for growth, accessible workspaces, and of course, ensuring that all staff members, regardless of background, lifestyle choices, and limitations or different abilities, can thrive. In terms of visitors, DEI means experiencing a travel industry that represents a diverse range of cultures, offers accessible facilities and activities, and encourages respect again for local customs, for lifestyle choices and backgrounds. So holistically, DEI aims to create an inclusive and enriching experience for all, regardless of their identity, ultimately contributing to a more vibrant and sustainable global travel community. So in terms of what we've done, it really, in accordance with our mandate, is to provide sensitization and awareness. And in that context, I'm really pleased to have to be collaborating with Travel Unity so they can bring some more insight on this topic, which is critically important, I think, for Caribbean tourism moving forward. Thank you, Roni, and I look forward to all of the speakers today.
Thank you, Amanda. So before we get to the speakers, I wanted to say welcome to our 2023 Travel Unity Summit Caribbean. This is our first event that we've held that's specifically focused on the Caribbean region. We've held events in the Northeast United States and the Southeast United States. Again, we're going to have in-person sessions. Excuse me. Today we'll have a roundtable in San Juan on the community impact, or on the impact of tourism on communities. Greg Takahara from Tourism Cares is going to co-facilitate that with me. And then tomorrow we have a full day of sessions. So I want to thank our planning committee for all the work they did helping put this together. And I want to acknowledge our board. Travel Unity is an NGO, a 501c3. We are a charitable nonprofit. Some of our board members are here, and I want to thank them for everything they do. Thank you to everybody who helped put this event together. Miles Partnership, IGLTA. So this is the week of the 40th Global Convention for IGLTA, the main LGBTQ travel association, and our Caribbean Summit is the first part of that program. Visit Greater Palm Springs, discover Puerto Rico, SIDA Youth Foundation, ASTA, Friends of El Yunque, Fundación Amigos del Yunque, and Offbeat Travel. Thank you to all of you. The hashtag for this event is TUIGLTA. Thank you to our media partners, to Jessica and to Matt. And with that, I would like to introduce and welcome our friend, Brian Major. Brian, can you tell us a bit about you in general? Why is Brian on this call? Why, when I reached out to Brian last minute, did he say, this is worth my time to talk about DEI in the Caribbean? Who are you?
Hi, Ronnie. Thanks, first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm Brian Major. I am managing editor of digital publications and guides and the Caribbean for travelpulse.com, which is a travel tourism site that goes to travel advisors and people in the tourism industry. I've been a reporter covering travel and the Caribbean for more than 25 years, longer than I'd like to admit. I have a diverse travel background. I've worked for CLIA as Director of Public Relations, the Cruise Association. I've been a cruise editor for both Travel Agent and Travel Weekly magazines. And for 10 plus years, I've covered the Caribbean exclusively, traveling to destinations and working with tourism organizations and travel agents and the travel advisors who sell Caribbean travel. So my comments today come from that perspective, come from that background as a journalist and as someone covering Caribbean travel. I have a few thoughts and a few things to say about Caribbean tourism and diversity in Caribbean tourism. And they're based on, again, what I've researched and worked on over the last decade, a couple decades. And I can say there are some statistics available on diversity and leadership in the U.S. tourism industry that I think provide some worthwhile comparisons with Caribbean tourism. In general, despite some progress since the nation's racial reckoning in recent years, there is generally a lack of inclusion for Black people and people of color at the highest levels of the tourism industry. C-suite personnel at North American tourism boards are 80% white, according to data cited by Bloomberg. Additionally, Black executives represent less than 2% of hospitality industry leadership, and Black entrepreneurs make up less than 2% of all U.S. hotel ownership. Those statistics are somewhat different for the Caribbean. I don't have statistics that directly speak to the Caribbean, but they're definitely comparable based on my observations over the years, certainly at the highest levels of Caribbean hotels and resorts, and even at the cruise lines serving Caribbean destinations. I have a couple more statistics. Black leadership roles in the hotel industry increased only marginally in 2022, according to a report from Pennsylvania State University's School of Hospitality Management. Penn State's study shows there was a 0.2% year-over-year increase in the percentage of Black representatives in hotel hospitality leadership in 2022, with an overall total of 2.2%. That number is obviously far behind the percentage of Black people in the US population, which is 13.6%. Notably, it's also far behind the percentage of Black employees working in traveler accommodations, which is 15.2%. And there again, I think there are direct comparisons with Caribbean hotels and resorts with leadership in comparison with the base of workers. There's a definite split there. The bottom line takeaway is, well, I want to first say that the report states that, quote, Black employees remain significantly underrepresented in hospitality industry leadership compared to what would be expected given Black representation in the total overall industry workforce. Again, the bottom line takeaway is there's a dearth of Black executives and C-level suite officials in rooms where the decisions are made about travel. Again, while these statistics from the US are not directly comparable with the Caribbean, it's certainly comparable based on my experience covering Caribbean hotels, resorts, and cruise lines. The second thing I want to provide is a little perspective from Danella Richards. Some of you may know Danella. Danella is a former cruise line executive who's now the host of a nationally syndicated travel program called Traveling with Danella. Now, when I interviewed her in 2022, she said there was much progress made in the area of Black professional representation in the cruise industry prior to the arrival of COVID-19. Yet during the summer of 2020, during COVID-19, there was an exodus of senior and executive level Black leadership in the cruise industry. Now, since that time, there's been an effort to hire mid-level Black professionals at cruise lines, but virtually no progress, Danella says, in the senior and executive level leadership positions. And that's certainly true as all of the major cruise lines in the wake of the pandemic overturned their leadership. And we saw no Black executives named among those folks. There are several companies that had open positions in 2021, and they made efforts to recruit and hire mid-level Black managers, but did not fill executive and suite level positions with qualified Black candidates where there had been candidates previously. And there had been high-level Black executives in the cruise industry. That took a step backwards. So Danella's question was, the cruise industry had some of the top Black senior level and executive talent in America prior to COVID-19. Where are they now? Finally, I want to make a point of some of the organizations that are working to make diversity a part of their ethos. There's a group now known as the Black Travel Alliance, which since 2020, it's a professional nonprofit organization that's encouraged, educated, equipped, and helped Black content creators, and other travel professionals excel. This year, it reportedly invested $175,000 to support Black creators through scholarships and brand partnerships. Secondly, under Tyrone Stoudemire, Hyatt Hotels has launched Change Starts Here. Tyrone is a global vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Hyatt, and the program is designed to accelerate the company's DEI efforts via actionable commitments around who the company employs and develops, who it supports, and who Hyatt buys from and works with. I want to also mention the Sandals Foundation. Throughout my time working in the Caribbean, I've been an admirer of what the Sandals Foundation has brought to the table, coming back to its own Caribbean destinations and providing scholarships, training, and aid to Caribbean people to allow them to progress through the hotel and hospitality industry. Sandals is a leader in this position. And then humbly, I want to name my own company, North Star Travel Media, which is the parent company of Travel Pulse. And they have done an admirable job. They have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that empowers internal recruitment and external community, products and events, and also leads efforts to fuel traction and changes in these areas. North Star also has a Black Travel Advisory Board that is committed to increasing Black representation at travel trade events for both speakers and attendees. The Travel Advisory Board also strives to develop intercultural sensitivity while seeking to bridge the gap between recruiters and candidates within the travel industry. In other words, to provide more educational and employment opportunities within the travel industry. Finally, that same board has contributed to idea generation for our articles on Travel Pulse and Travel Weekly, and we've executed many of those articles based on the perspective of these Black travel leaders. So I like to think generally that just as we've learned recently about our democracy in the United States, there's never a time when diversity and inclusion and equity should not be part of the equation, should not be fought for, and should not be part of initiatives. I don't think we're ever going to reach a point where we're going to be satisfied. You know, you can see where the numbers are now, they're very low. So we have a long way to go. So that's my thing.
That was awesome, Brian. Thank you. I'd love if you can dig a little more into the media side, because Jessica is going to come in from, I'd say, more of an influencer, new media component. Not to say anything about your years of experience, but I think you have more kind of old media understanding. So media with all of this, if you want to dig a little into that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I am a representative of old media. I am not. I'm not. I predate the influencer age. When I started as a journalist, I started with a typewriter. I've been in this business a long time, and those statistics that I read about hotel representation versus the Black population, it pretty much holds true for the media business in general. It is underrepresented in terms of diversity, in terms of Black participants. The progress has been very slow in the wake of the racial reckoning here in the U.S. There was some effort by media companies to place diversity at the core of at least what they were talking about, and some followed through with those efforts. But I dare say the numbers are pretty similar. There is under 5% of professionals or leadership positions, certainly at media companies across the board, including travel, including my own company. And we have some recent statistics on hiring at our travel publications, where we're approaching now at North Star the levels of representation of Blacks in the U.S. population, which is something like 12, 13%. We're approaching those numbers now. So while we're doing a lot, there's a lot of room for growth. And I want to make finally the point that I'm very proud that Black travel influencers have taken up this challenge, and they're not old school journalism people, but they are reporters in their own sense, and they're out there, they're talking about travel, they're legitimate. They have flowered and created this whole great kaleidoscope of travel reporting that goes beyond what the traditional media is providing. And I was blown away just meeting some of these young people and what they're doing, and they're tremendous followings. So they haven't waited for traditional media to give them the opportunities. They've gone out and seized the day, and I'm so proud of what they've been able to do. If we could do anything to help traditional media get closer to that, I'd love to see it in my lifetime.
Brian, sorry.
We'll see.
I know we have questions from the audience. I want to ask about Brian the man. As a Black man traveling in the Caribbean, what are your experiences compared to other places that you travel to? Is there anything for better, worse, neutral? Like anything to share notable?
Well, definitely the most noticeable thing as a reporter is just seeing the gap between Black employees and Black leadership at the manager and the general managers and et cetera. And the higher levels are usually from European hotel schools and that kind of thing. And the staff is usually Black. That's the most noticeable and obvious thing. I mean, you know, there's very solicitous treatment. I'm treated well when I'm, you know, at resorts in general in the Caribbean. There are instances where my wife and I, we've talked about how some of the same conceptions about who may be traveling affect some of the staff at hotels, and I see differences in the way at times in the way I'm treated than some other guests. So that does happen. Thankfully, there are more Black people traveling than ever. The biggest change that I've noticed in my 30 years of being in this industry is that there are way more Black people traveling to different destinations around the Caribbean and in general, you know, leisure traveling outside of the US. So I'm very happy about that. And I think they feel a little more safe and secure than they have before about how they're going to be treated.
So just quickly, for those who might not have those experiences, you said sometimes you might feel like you're treated a little differently. Is there anything to give somebody some insight as to what that looks like?
Well, I see I may be standing at a counter and as I'm standing next to a white guest and the white guest gets treated first, okay? Or gets addressed first or something like that, you know. And one of the tough things about these kinds of things, these incidents is like you start to think to yourself, is it because I'm Black? Is it maybe I'm overreacting, or what is the story, or what is it? You know, and so, I mean, these are triggering, not great things to talk about. I'm not happy when these things happen. I don't like them, you know. But as a Black person, this is part of the thing that we deal with every day.
Thank you for sharing, Brian. I'm, you know, obviously not a fun thing to deal with. We have a question from the audience. What are the role of governments and authorities in Caribbean Sea area in development of diversity and inclusion in tourism? So what do you think the role of governments and authorities along those lines are in this work?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about governments, they are not directly in control of hotel or resort properties. They can't do much more than encourage and promote or, you know, or behind the scenes promote worthwhile candidates. I must say, certainly across the Caribbean, virtually all of the government leadership are Caribbean and natives of that destination, which is great. And these are some of the best people in tourism, the most highly trained and most capable people in tourism. One of the reasons I named Sandals as a contributor in this regard is that they have provided the greater tourism industry with a diversity of Black professionals that are highly trained and highly recognized and highly valued. So there needs to just be more of that. And, you know, it goes back to the leadership of those particular hotels and resorts. Are they committed to promoting worthwhile candidates? We used to hear so often that, oh, there are no candidates. We used to hear this on the media side. There are no Black people interested in being reporters and being, you know, and that kind of sentiment is just not accurate. Because as the influencer side has shown in media, there's a ton of Black people who are capable and talented in that area. And I'm sure the same is true in the hospitality. I know the same is true in the hospitality industry. But I would say that more of our people more of the Black people and people of color need to be exposed to the opportunities that are available in the hospitality industry.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Shmuel Yerushalmi, for that question. I'm sure we'll get to hear a bit more from Brian later, but I'd love to invite Maureen and Omar to present about their work. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Maureen, you're still muted. Omar,
Yes,
you're on. There, okay.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's morning, I think.
Sorry, morning. So good morning. First of all, thank you for your contribution, Brian Major. I totally enjoyed the dialogue, and thank you for Caribbean Tourism Organization for putting on this platform. Today we're going to be speaking about the role that Jamaica can play, and my mother Maureen will be sharing about her story, right? And we have a little slide presentation that we have put together, and I'm tourism my entire life. I am 37, but I've been in tourism since I'm 15, and I have traveled extensively in the Caribbean, and I lived in Europe, and I wanted to have Jamaica be a part of the conversation as it relates to sustainable travel. And you learn more about our programs and you learn more about our story, but I'll turn over for my mother, Maureen, to introduce herself.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name, as you know, is Maureen Wright-Evans, and I'm excited to be here this morning. We were so happy when we got this opportunity to share and make Jamaica be part of the conversation. So we are going to do our presentation in two parts. I will be telling you my story of how my life changed in the tourism industry. I've been in tourism almost all my life, and my story will show you just how far we have come and where we are today. So I want to talk to you about how a tourist gave back to a local community and changed my life and started me on a journey of inspiration and transformation in Caribbean tourism and DEI. So before we dive into the future of DEI in the Caribbean tourism, and especially Jamaica, I wanted to take a moment to share with you the story that has been the driving force behind my career and the inspiration for the work that we are here to discuss today. So the inspiration for my international educational programs came from an unexpected gift of a Canadian tourist visiting Jamaica. So I grew up with a single parent. My mother used to work long hours, and she didn't want to leave me alone at home. You see, as a single parent, she became pregnant when she was 17 years old. And by the age of 19, she had 3 children. And from the day I know myself, my mother was always telling me, "You're not going to get pregnant." That was a song in my ears. And so when she would get these housekeeping jobs in the resort town of Port Antonio, it's called Sanson. This is where they do the movies. I'm sure you've heard of Blue Lagoon, where they filmed the movie Blue Lagoon and many other movies in Portland. She would take me, she was a cook and a housekeeper, and she would take me to the villas and the resorts and hide me in the staff quarters. Now, you're not supposed to take your child at your workplace, but she was determined that was the only way she would provide supervision for me. So one day, of course, I went to school, and when I was back, she locked me in the staff quarters, and she thought I was in the staff quarters. So I tiptoed, and I was outside in the sea, playing with the sea egg, and I saw 2 tourists coming down, and they were saying, "Oh, what a lovely girl." And when I saw this couple, this Canadian couple, I had in my head all along all those years that maybe some tourists would take me away and I would escape from this life of poverty. So when I saw them and they started talking to me, I said to myself, this is my moment. And I started answering the questions and telling them about the different places they could go and what they could do. And they were so impressed with me. They say, "Wow, would you like to come up and get some cookies and drinks from the housekeeper?" And of course I said yes. And so I ran upstairs with them. And when my mother saw me, she almost collapsed. She said, "Oh my God, this is my daughter. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to bring them here." But to cut a long story short, they were saying, "Wow, Rima," that was her name. They said, "This is your daughter." And they asked me to take my stuff up, and they made me stay upstairs, and I started staying with the guests upstairs, and I traveled with them, and I showed them Jamaica as an 11-year-old girl through my eyes, and they were blown away. And then, to cut the story, it's a long story, but because I only have a short time and I want to tell you a lot more, when they were leaving, they asked my mother if they could adopt me. And so my mother said, no, I couldn't give up my only daughter. And they were so disappointed. But what they did those days, if you couldn't go to a high school passing what you call the common entrance examination, you could pay the school fee. So they paid the fee for me to go to high school. But I was also a very good athlete. And so between them paying the fee for me and I becoming an athlete, I got scholarships and I went through school. But shortly after I started high school, my mother died suddenly. And I got help from the tourists straight through high school. And I went to college and I became a teacher. I started my career as a teacher and loved the experience of helping students learn. However, I wanted to go beyond the traditional classroom setting and provide unforgettable adventure trips that would expand learning opportunities. This desire led me to step into the world of entrepreneurship, where I discovered a void in the marketplace. Jamaica was not widely recognized as a destination for volunteering or service learning or international educational programs. So motivated by my vision of providing impactful experiences for youth, I later founded the Jamaica Youth Development Foundation. And one of the featured events was a sports camp. Remember, I told you I was a top athlete, track and field athlete in Jamaica. And I wanted to use sports to offer scholarship to US universities for talented athletes, providing them life-changing opportunities. During this journey, I realized my passion for helping travelers give back to local communities and make a positive difference. In 2005, I launched my first brand, Jamaica Volunteer Programs, which aimed to connect volunteers with meaningful service opportunities. Later, my son, Omar, who is right here, discovered his own deep passion. He was always interested in the family business. When I used to run the sports camp and have the volunteers and the educational groups come here, he was always helping and learning. So today, he's carrying on the legacy of helping youth become future leaders, continuing our mission of empowering young people through international education. Throughout my career as a teacher and entrepreneur, I have been driven by a commitment to fill the void in the market and provide transformative experiences for students. My ultimate goal is to inspire and empower the next generation to become global citizens and make a positive impact in the world. So as we embark on this webinar, exploring the benefits of DEI from the Caribbean perspective, I want you to join us in this journey of inspiration and transformation. And Omar is going to talk to you about the services we offer and how we have seen tourism change, especially since COVID in Jamaica. It's like we are looking on a whole new product range, but he's going to tell you much more. So over to you, Omar.
Yes. So every time I hear that story, it reminds me of the benefits of tourism when done right? Because this conversation is about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also hence sustainable tourism. Now, as my mother said, I grew up hearing the story of how a tourist came to Jamaica and sponsored a child, and I was inspired by that journey, and I decided that I wanted to also continue that legacy, and we wanted to also expand outside of Jamaica to the wider Caribbean. So today we have redesigned our organization, and we launched early in 2022 Global Service Adventures. And Global Service Adventure is a youth travel organization focusing on youth to become global citizens and to participate in programs that take them into the heart of the communities and allow them to give back and give. And there are different ways that students can give back. They can join different leadership programs, but specifically, I want to talk about the last year prior to COVID, what the difference we have seen in the new travelers and the range of experiences that they're wanting. So to expand a little bit on what Major Brian spoke about, we recognize here in Jamaica that Jamaicans are, the diaspora community are not aware of the different opportunities that exist. So what we have found is that historically, a lot of the students that youth would travel would have been students from private schools, white students. And since 2022, we're seeing an uptick in Black African American, the BIPOC community, traveling more, wanting to have these experiences. And this had allowed us now to start to redesign our programs. So what we did is that we sat down and we had such as the indigenous people here, the Maroons or the Rastafarian communities, just to name a few. And we kind of a needs assessment to what are the things that they wanted to achieve. And out of those discussions, they wanted to build capacity to own the experience. What we decided to do is to launch a whole initiative around capacity building. So we reached out to international organizations to get a trip leader training and tour guide training to train the very persons from the community to tell their own story. And in doing this, we started to realize that we had to change our approach in terms of how we went about these programs. And what we did was we identified leaders from the community, and we started to do some training, allowing them to lead their trips in their parts of the island. So Jamaica has 14 parishes, Montego Bay, Ocherous, the North Coast, and the mountainous regions. And launched through these discussions, we also launched new products. And these products ranges from indigenous tours, right? Where we allow persons to go into the community, and also we launch what we call Black History and Afro-Caribbean Culture Tours. So these were tours that allow students who we share a lot in common. What the Caribbean in a whole have in common is we all, from slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, and these students, to know where you're going, you have to know where you're coming from. So we started and of time going any further into it, but you can visit our website to learn more about. So what are the similarities that Jamaica has with the rest of the Caribbean? So on the call we have Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. I think the similarities as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusions are we all have a historical context where Jamaica and the Caribbean have a history of slavery, and we need to have our programs to be more inclusive, right? We need to be more. What we did is we also launch virtual experiences, which would give students or people of color who traditionally couldn't afford to travel to participate in some of these virtual experiences, and also just to bring more awareness to the programs and how they can get involved. Another similarity is cultural diversity. Due to colonial legacies and diverse migration, Caribbean countries boast multiculturalism, necessitating including and equitable practices. Jamaica and the Caribbean share environmental challenges such as climate change, biodiversity and conservation, and we allow our travelers to travel responsibly and participate in these programs and learn about the issues. So I hope you found this discussion to be meaningful, and I will now turn over the discussion or open up the discussion for questions, if there's any.
Thank you, Maureen and Omar. A lot of positive comments on sharing your story with us. Any questions for Maureen or Omar about their work? All right. Maureen and Omar, if you want to drop your information in the chat, if people want to reach out to you later, that would be great. Jessica, I know you are not feeling well, so we appreciate you still making the time for us. If you want to tell us a bit about who you are and your place in all this, because we've had a lot of discussion about kind of the Black diaspora experience, and there are other cultural and ethnic identities and linguistic and things like that. And I feel like some of where you're coming from is from another part of all this, Jessica.
Hi, Ronnie, and thank you so much. And sorry my video's not on, but yeah, yesterday I succumbed to COVID, so feeling a bit under the weather, but I didn't want to miss this important discussion. So a little bit about myself. My name is Jessica DeJesus, and I'm the founder of The Dining Traveler, which is a multimedia multimedia platform focusing on the hospitality industry, food and travel, which is a big passion of mine. I am a hija del Caribe. I'm from Puerto Rico. I grew up in a small town called Guayama, and then I went to high school and college in upstate New York. So balance that part of the diaspora, and having spent a significant part of my childhood in Puerto Rico. And one of the reasons I built The Dining Traveler was because when I started writing about food and travel, I would pitch my stories everywhere and they weren't being picked up. And when I saw people writing about Puerto Rico, it was always people that did not have a familial tie to the island. And this is 10 years ago. And I just didn't even see that many people of color writing stories about travel or even about food. So that's how I started my platform and created a place for me to be able to share the stories. And it's really interesting from Brian's conversation, talking about the evolution of traditional media to now more digital media, social media, and how that's changed the travel patterns, right? We're seeing more people from the diaspora, like Omar was talking, people coming that maybe had Jamaican parents. We see this in Puerto Rico. A lot of the people that read my blog or follow me on social are people from the Puerto Rican diaspora that are trying to connect to their roots. And I still find that I feel Discover Puerto Rico in the last few years has tapped into that market a bit more. But I think that that's something, we have such a big diaspora in the United States and even in Europe of the Caribbean community. And it would be great to see more of that tapping into those communities instead of finding what I see is white people telling the stories, of the Caribbean. Because, we were talking about language, being fluent in Spanish. There's different ways that I can interview people, reach different people that perhaps an Anglo journalists are not is not able to. But even at this day in 2023, I still feel that you know, whether it's content creators or journalists of color are still fighting to get those stories, and not only those stories, but in our pitches, telling people, yes, like the story about this lady that has a small restaurant in a coastal town of Puerto Rico, like her story deserves to be told, or a small hotel that is not glamorous, but it's is a person that started it with their family. Like those stories deserve to be told, even though they don't have a big PR machine behind them. So for me, that's really important in the work that I do with the Dining Traveler, and what I did with my book, The Dining Traveler Guide to Puerto Rico, which is a coffee table book that I published 4 years ago. And I started the project in 2015. I did a Kickstarter because again, couldn't find funding from the project, and but a lot of my followers and friends chipped in. I chipped in for my own money, but I wanted to tell a story from a different angle of Puerto Ricans. So we went on a road trip, and we went to towns like Adjuntas in the heart of Puerto Rico, my hometown of Guayama. We went to Cabo Rojo, places that you really don't read in mainstream travel media, especially back then. And when I started the project in 2015, 2016. And for me, one of the challenges that I've seen writing about Puerto Rico, and then expanding, I've done some other stories covering the Caribbean, is the digital divide that still exists, especially with small businesses, and something that I would love to see more of the tourism boards helping small restaurants, hotels, tour guides be able to be more present digitally, like meaning having a good website, good social media presence, ways that they can connect with different journalists. So maybe some media training for their voices to be heard. So it's not always the same people being featured in media.
Thank you, Jessica. So I want to ask a question, and Brian, I'm going to want your take on this too. And if we do have other media people, and even beyond, I don't think you said this, so I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying you did. But the question of who can tell the stories is a huge question around DEI. So when it comes to I think that there's probably a general awareness and appreciation that if you speak Spanish, you can dig deeper. But from your perspective, Jessica, in terms of permission writ large, who can and can't tell the stories of these different groups?
I think that everybody should be able to tell the story, right? Because different demographics want different things. I live in Europe right now. I write stories about, Europe from my perspective of living here. But I'm not European, so I'm not saying that only one person is allowed to tell the story. But it shouldn't be only one group telling the story. And I think that having a diversity of voices, and I think that having local voices is really important, but also having voices from a traveler's perspective, because as we all know, like when we live in our cities, we get so comfortable in our neighborhoods and our things that we might not be able to see something from a traveler's perspective. So I do think that a diversity of voices is very important, but without forgetting about those that are in the diaspora, those that have a familial connection to those lands.
Thank you, Jessica. Brian, anything to add? I think Jessica is right on the money there, that everyone has something to offer. Everyone has some perspective to offer. I don't think there's no issue to me of permission or ability to tell a story. The story's validity and its perspective comes from who's telling it. So again, Jessica raises the point that traditionally it's been one group telling the story, and it still is to that extent. And people like Jessica and others who have diversified the communications have contributed so much to the telling of the story and the richness of the narrative and the validity of the information provided. You know, I was watching TikTok, and the video, you know, it's just a bunch of videos. And you know, there was a video with one of my heroes, James Brown, the singer, and then someone was interviewing him in the 70s, and he was talking about soul music, and he said, you know, to be a soul singer, you know, it helps to be Black. He said, because a Black person, the Black man comes from the perspective of, he was, in his own words, he said, extra hard knocks, and which is 100% true. And so when it comes out of him, it comes out a little stronger. It comes out a little different. So I want to hear that perspective when I'm hearing a soul record. And, you know, when we're talking about travel, I want to hear the perspective of, you know, somebody who's from the Caribbean. Maybe when we're talking about the Caribbean, doesn't make it any less or more valid than any other perspective, but it's different.
Thank you, Brian. Jessica, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Brian, but you're not a Black man, so you're going to speak from a different perspective, which is why I'm asking you. In your travels in the Caribbean, what have been your experiences, you know, as a Puerto Rican woman, as a citizen of the world? What's it like for you?
You know, it's interesting because I feel like that's evolved. It's been an evolution, I have to say, and I'll be very frank. When I visit the rest of the Caribbean, when it's not you know, when it's not Puerto Rico, it's a different thing. I feel like there's more camaraderie. They're like, hey, you know, there's another Caribbean person here. But I do think that in Puerto Rico, there's still that barrier. And I think that after the hurricane, it did soften a little bit about who is a Puerto Rican and who's a New Yorican and who's somebody from the diaspora, and how some of the folks sometimes are treated as like, oh, you're not from here anymore, or you don't understand our struggles anymore. And I think that the hurricane was very pivotal in the sense that the folks that did live in Puerto Rico saw how the diaspora came and showed up and helped the local population. And I think that that welcoming has changed quite a bit for me in my experience. And after I published my book, I even noticed I was a bit nervous because, you know, I haven't lived in Puerto Rico. I went to college there for a bit in 1999, but I do travel back and forth quite often. But I haven't lived there, you know, in over now it's almost 25 years. So, but when I did the book, I was amazed at the openness that I had from the local media, from the Puerto Rican media. So I think that and I think that this is, you know, due to social media, due to digital, how people are more connected. But I see a more openness to the diaspora voice.
Thank you. Levi wants to know, Jessica, if you collaborate with travel agents at all.
I have not, but I'm always open to it.
Well, Levi and Jessica, feel free to connect. All right. We are at the hour, but we have half an hour more scheduled, which means that I'm going to tell you a bit more about Travel Unity, and then we're going to have a discussion. Joan dropped a question in the chat that I think is going to be a great thing for us to jump on. But if you have any other topics that you want addressed, please make sure that you put them in the chat publicly or to me. So the first thing I wanted to mention quickly is that Travel Unity has publicly available DEI standards. We have two sets. One of them is for visitor-facing organizations. So for us, that's destinations, attractions, hotels, anybody who's looking to welcome a visitor. And these are around three pillars: management and workforce, so the people who are working there; visitorship, the main customers; and then community impact. Again, you can look at these standards on our website. I'll drop the link in the chat. Our other set of standards are for special events and sports. So for conferences, trade shows, festivals, and sporting events, the idea of these is how do you bring DEI from the very beginning, not just have it as an afterthought. So again, available on our website for organizations that want to walk through these. In terms of working with Travel Unity, we have our Alliance, which is for individuals and organizations. We do workshops around DEI, we do consulting work, and we have both individual and organizational certifications. Our Alliance, we have monthly membership meetings virtually. You get discounts on our events, and all levels of membership include certification and coaching as part of those. I wanted to invite Chad to speak quickly because Chad comes at things from a different angle. We've talked a lot today about race and ethnicity, but when Travel Unity is talking about DEI, we're talking about any array of identities. And what I'll tell people is, you know, being gluten-free as part of DEI. If I show up somewhere and I can't eat the things that I need to eat or prefer to eat or whatever, I'm not going to feel like I belong. I'm not going to have an optimal experience. So Chad, if you could share a bit about your work and how it relates to DEI and maybe a little of your story, I think that'd be a great way for us to start kicking off the conversational component.
Thank you, Ronnie. Appreciate the opportunity to be part of the discussion today and really appreciate all the perspective that's been shared thus far. So really, I reached out to Ronnie and Travel Unity, knowing that the queer travel community was coming together this week in San Juan, which is an incredible opportunity. And as being a person who identifies as somebody that's part of that community, I'm a cisgender gay male. And I wanted to also propose the idea, the opportunity that can exist. And for me, at the age of 48, having relocated to San Juan from upstate New York, specifically around health and wellness. And so I also identify as an individual that is in long-term recovery. It's been something that I've been involved in since my early 20s. And it's certainly something that individuals from across the spectrum of the queer community have struggled with and have wrestled with and have found recovery. And I know that that can be true for marginalized communities, for Black, Hispanic communities, where you have a disproportionate amount of struggle with substance use and mental health issues. And so when we think about travel, seeing the opportunity as we move forward to create opportunities for wellness or to shine a light on travel or engagement in this past week, I partnered with a local queer guest house in San Juan, and they hosted their first ever sober week. There's replicas of recovery roundups that have happened around the country. And so there's actually 2 cruises, gay cruises, that are going to be either making a port or departing from San Juan. And oftentimes, I think there can be a very much emphasis on partying, having a good time, quote unquote, and indulging in overindulgence. And so I think there's an opportunity to also engage folks in the wider spectrum of the recovery community to engage in travel. And I really believe that the Caribbean is a profoundly healing place. And it certainly has been for me so far. And I look forward to doing more of my own healing here, but also shining a light on the opportunity that exists to engage more folks in this way. So thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, Chad. So I wanted to give space for anybody to talk more maybe about identities that they feel haven't necessarily been represented yet. I know that accessibility and disability we haven't touched on much. I know Chad just related to LGBTQ. Karen, did you want to say something? Yeah, that was just a stretchy.
Just stretching my cast here.
Oh, I gotta find out what happened with that, but not right now. I guess that's temporary disability. So yeah, I guess you called it out. Thanks, Karen. I wanted to touch on Joan's question. So she wanted to know, Joan, do you want to come on and ask it?
Thank you. This is Joan Eisenstadt, and I will not show myself because I'm dealing not with COVID. I'm dealing with long COVID today, and So not adorable as my picture is. What I'm curious about it, and Brian, this is something you touched on, and that is when we read a policy, when we understand that companies, cities, destinations are touting their DEI policies, and we don't experience that they are actually doing it, that we face something that shows that it's almost an opposition to that. What are the best ways? I ask this not just of you, but of all. What are the ways? Do we, as individuals, travelers, for me as a meeting planner, do we call it out only to a person with whom we're dealing at a whatever level, property level, destination level? Do we go to the corporation? Do we call it out publicly? Thanks, Roni.
Brian, do you want to start with a reaction? I imagine, with the bully pulpit of the media, that's where do you see that in all this?
And launch a media investigation. That's a very good question, and you make a very good point. And when I think of it, it's kind of a scenario where I believe it's almost a any means necessary kind of thing. If you are a person who is in connection with people who might make a difference working with the tourism board or have some kind of influence with leadership of a particular organization that may have espoused these principles, but not in your view or in anyone's view followed through. Perhaps there's a way to address it officially there. Certainly organized boycotts and those kinds of things, organized opposition has been effective in some cases and maybe might be warranted. I can speak to the regard of with regards to a travel publication, a travel industry publication. We all know, I'm not going to name it. It's an online publication, but also produces some guidebooks. But I remember during the racial reckoning of a few years back, 3 years back now, lots of media organizations were putting black dots on their social media pages to express solidarity with Black Lives Matters and other movements of that sort. And other organizations called them out and pointed out that they didn't really have any Black employees, or maybe this was not a legitimate initiative at those particular publications. And there was a variety of kind of responses. There was no organized one thing, we're going to talk to these people about this or that. I kind of talked to some of the folks that I knew over there and just expressed my concerns. I don't know if anything happened with regard specifically to their corporate initiatives. I know they did hire at least one Black editor months after that. But it's hard to say, and I'm probably not, I don't have the expertise to formulate what might be the best responses, but I'm sure we have smart people all over, and people who are involved in our business at different levels. And I know folks can do what they are able to do to address these things. But again, they need to be addressed. I don't know if people probably have much better thoughts on comments and thoughts on this, but.
We'll start with smart person Harry. Harry, if you want to tell people about what you do first, a little for those who aren't going to be able to make it to Puerto Rico, let them know who you are and what Offbeat Travel is, please. And Harry is one of our board members. Harry and Karen are two of our board members, so thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Ronnie. Sorry, it's a little loud here. I'm in Puerto Rico, but I'm in a coffee shop right now. I'm in very cold recently. So I'm Harry. I'm the founder of Offbeat Travel, a destination management company that operates in the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Costa Rica. And I think the reason I wanted to chime in on this question is It really comes, sometimes it's about where you spend your money. And you know, and if you're going to be working for, like, when I work with a hotel property or tour operator, you know, we go through the whole vendor vetting process. When you think of vendor vetting, we typically just think of, you know, safety and this kind of stuff. But also you have to vet them to see if they align with your mission. Um, and if I'm not going to be working with, like, with a hotel that are bigoted, and you know, initially you can talk to the owner, the manager, whoever your contacts are, and say, like, hey, we didn't really like this. How can we better this? And if it doesn't work after a while, you start working with it. And then you start, that way you really encourage and support the vendors that want to align with this mission and want to make a positive change. So I think spending, you know, where you spend your money is really important, and especially when it comes to big properties, you know, that's the way to really move the needle in a lot of ways in changing your mind. They may all of a sudden want to talk to you about how to implement an actual DEI plan when you're saying, I'm not going to do my giant event there anymore.
Thank you, Harry. So yeah, making sure that you are working with people who have those aligned values as a consumer and as a business. Any other kind of individual, organizational, or industry-wide thoughts on how to address that potential misalignment? Joan, follow-up question.
Thanks, Roni and Harry and Brian. Thank you. And Brian, you used the boycott word, and when both of the responses there was how we use our money. The industry itself, and I have been a meeting planner for 50 years, and I continue to consult in the meetings industry with my own company and work with clients that are now putting a lot of questions in their RFPs. The industry, and I won't name industry organization names, and it's obviously not Travel Unity. The industry believes that that boycotts are bad, that we're, quote, hurting the people we want to help. And so it, to me, is interesting that we don't talk more about how we use our money, where we use it, and what we do. And then when we're putting people's lives in danger, and for me, it's always around safety and security, that it's not a boycott, it's a smart, different kind of decision. I don't know if anybody else wants to address it. I find it to be a very difficult time in trying to help clients.
Joan, you're right, and you're right, and I think that when you're talking specifically about boycotts, one of the potential negative impacts is it may hurt some of the people, you know, that are doing the boycotting, maybe, let's say, because I know that's come up recently with Visit Florida and with the state policies regarding Black people and Black education in Florida. And I mean, this is where it gets difficult because, you know, as a Black person, there's no question that these policies are racist, inappropriate. I don't have strong enough words to talk about. I don't know if everybody's up on what some of the state policies regarding the ability of teachers to teach certain subjects in Florida schools has happened recently. This is, yeah, ridiculous, as Harry said, is a word that comes to mind. It's, you know, it's just a denial of history. But at the same time, the NAACP and some other organizations have supported or called for, didn't even call for a boycott, actually, NAACP. They actually called for folks to look at their travel decisions in light of that legislation. They did not call for a boycott. But Visit Florida and some other organizations came out and made the point, which I believe is a valid point, that it does hurt potentially some Black-owned businesses, et cetera, with folks not coming to Florida. But this is the cost, this is the price, this is the conundrum of these policies. These, you know, this lack of inclusion and this bias creates these scenarios, and we're not going to get anywhere until we, learn to surmount and get past these things. So yeah, it hurts a lot of people.
Thank you, Brian. I'd love for anybody who identifies as being part of the LGBTQ world to maybe speak to your experiences in the Caribbean, especially over the period of time, if that's something you have to speak to. I don't know if anybody wants to chime in as to feelings around safety, belonging, etc. Chad, if nobody else is going to volunteer, I'm going to call you out because you've moved to Puerto Rico. So
yeah, and I think it's fair to say that oftentimes the queer community is very intentional when they do their Google searches on where they want to travel and where they want to go to make sure that they're going to be engaging in travel in a safe space. And so, the guest house that I was referring to that just recently had their first sober week in just in Ocean Park, just outside of San Juan. They identify as the queerest guest house in the Caribbean. And so, you can do lots of different Google searches and come up with different things. But coming from upstate New York is relatively, obviously, a blue state and progressive when it comes to marriage equality happened in 2011. And so I have a husband. We've been together for 19 years. And so as we travel and go out into the world, we want to make sure that we're going to a place where we feel safe and comfortable. And I moved here. My husband joined me in coming down on June 1st, and that weekend was actually Pride in Puerto Rico. So I was here for the Pride Parade the first weekend I came down to Puerto Rico, which was pretty fantastic. And I'm excited, and here we go. Like this week, we have the Gay Travel Association from around the world coming this week to San Juan, which is exciting. And there's two, gay cruises that are going, or queer cruises that are going to be either porting or taking off from San Juan. So it's pretty exciting. But yeah, I think that, however, Discover Puerto Rico, I think, has done a good job in creating space in their pages to identify and put out, queer friendly or, guest houses or places to stay or events or things that you could do. So I think there's definitely opportunities for folks to promote that kind of safe space to that specific population. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Anybody else who wants to chime in on one of the things we've talked about or anything that we haven't covered yet? Maureen, you're going to have to unmute and then you can talk.
Yes, Brian, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the major reasons for Black people not being represented in the travel industry over many sectors, as you described, whether hotel, all the aspects? You were talking about it, but you didn't mention why you think the major reasons why Black people are not represented.
Thank you, Maureen. I know other people wanted to ask too, so I'm glad we got that one out there. Brian?
Why I think, I mean, I don't think there's one reason. There's a few reasons, I believe. Certainly, leadership in tourism and hospitality is mostly white. Most of the time, leaders, whether I don't know if it's always intentional bias, people in all organizations tend to hire the people that look like them and the people that they recognize, they see themselves in. So if almost all of the leadership is white, it tends to follow that a lot of the, employee base is white. Certainly in the higher roles and the roles that directly work with those leaders. And certainly in Caribbean destinations and in other destinations, service roles have been traditionally filled by Black people, so and people of color. So they are often viewed as that is their role. So I think that's one reason. Certainly, there's a lack of it's changing, but there's a lack of awareness among Black folks of the variety of opportunities in hospitality. There are Black people who are accountants and electricians and engineers, etc., capable of everything that's involved in running a hotel or operating a resort. There are Black people who work at the highest levels in a variety of industries who probably just aren't aware that those same opportunities exist in hospitality, and you know, a lot of good opportunities in hospitality. So I think that's another reason. And then you know, though I think those are the main two reasons. I mean, there's just such a long way to go in terms of creating opportunity for people of color in a variety of industries, and it starts at the top. Things filter from the top down. So the more leadership we can get, I think the more progress we'll be able to make.
So how do you think we can start changing it? I mean, I have ideas.
Well,
but
I'd like to hear somebody else express some ideas.
Yes,
I'm not the
let's
sole
talk.
font of ideas for change. I mean, I think some of the ideas that have been mentioned here are pretty good. Certainly mentorships and initiatives within hospitality companies to hire and promote Black folks and to reach out to Black organizations. And then thankfully we have more organizations like Travel Unity, like the Black Travel Alliance, which is another group which works with Black tourism, Black travel professionals who work with tourism boards and travel organizations and have partnerships with major travel companies. The more we have of that, the more it's going to change the picture.
Brian, I would like to add, I think Harry made a comment in the chat box about historically companies have not marketed to people of color. And I agree with him, because as an organization in the past, when we started our journey, honestly, we didn't market to Black community. And the reason for it is that travel, the biggest barrier to travel is cost. So Black people would like to travel more, but the reality is that they don't have the funds, the money. So what we did is that we continued to market to the predominantly white communities, but we used the higher cost to offset the cost to the Black community. So that's one of the strategies that we took, so we could actually continue to market to Black person, but at a more affordable cost. So, and we are a for-profit organization. Well, I would say we're a social enterprise because we reinvest our profits into the project. And I actually was a part of Richard Branson in the Caribbean, his initiative. I launched the company through his initiative. So I think we need to change the narrative and we need to look at the broader issues. There's no right or wrong answer. I think it's a combination of all of these factors that let the barrier to entry be so high for predominantly Black persons of color to travel. And also, if the messaging and the marketing in the past have been exclusive of Black people, you'd look at a brochure and you're seeing 68 white persons volunteering in the community, helping the community, and sometimes that can be looked upon as poverty marketing, right? So I think a lot have been happening because of the awareness on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Many organizations now are seeing that we have to change the way how we position the products, and also we need to reach out to that demographic of students and travelers to get them more involved in travel.
Yeah,
Thank you, Omar. Helen, did you want to?
Yeah, I
go
was
for it,
just going to say I don't have a background in education, but I think educational institutions, the more that programs they offer these programs within universities, colleges, and universities, that more people have access to hospitality and tourism as a course of study, that's going to help as well from an educational perspective. I think within organizations, within companies, those that are genuinely focused and want to make a difference in the lives of people on diversity, equity, and inclusion, their programs as well should begin to open up opportunities for people of color to move into higher roles, right? Because as we've talked about, you see a lot of color at the lowest level of these organizations. And so as you look up the ladder, fewer and fewer and fewer. And yes, it's pyramidical in shape. So it's gonna be that way. But I think the more that the focus is, and we push that as an industry, the higher the likelihood that we begin to see that change. But I think as Omar, I think you said, and others, it's broad. And I think we have to, Maureen, to answer your question as well, we have to look at it and as a group, this group is a powerful group just in terms of this discussion, continue to discuss it and come up with ideas. How do we influence as Travel Unity is trying to the change?
Thank you, Helen. So I'm going to give you a roadmap for the next couple minutes. We're going to call on Fundación Amigos del Yunque. Then Levi's going to tell us a bit about their work. And then Amanda Charles from CTO is going to finish things up. Carmen Portela.
Hi, everybody. I've been listening do you hear me, right? Yes?
Yes, we're hearing you.
I've been listening very attentive. I am newly in my new role in the conservation area. But I used to work for a lot of years in tourism, and especially in sustainable tourism. I used to run a travel tour operator here in Puerto Rico. And we encounter a couple of systematic problems that as a colleague, as Omar was saying, there are barriers into entering the industry. So not only we have barriers of being Latino, we're being Black or LGBTQ, there's systematic problems with our industry, with the tourism industry, that makes the entry to it very, very difficult for disadvantaged communities. So I've been trying to deal with this for, as probably all of you, for more than a decade, especially how to grow community-based tourism in Puerto Rico, because that's the first step to communities empowering themselves to lead in the tourism industry, and not see themselves only as in support or hospitality around cleaning, security, because they've never seen themselves as bosses. I think there's a shift that has to come to mind to shift into I can lead, I can be a boss in the industry, because for so many years we've been run by multinational corporations that are part of the travel industry, and that's all we know. That the travel industry is a flagship, a big flagship with different names. That none of us is our last names, right? So my new role, I see the same situation happening in conservation. Conservation is an area that is also run by white. There's not a lot of diversity even in Puerto Rico. So with this new role, I brought the same issue that I continue to see in the travel industry, and I see it also in my new role. And the conversation completely shifted into, okay, so then we have to support in writing new laws that enables community-based tourism, that enables disadvantaged communities to be able to enter the tourism industry. And I say this because I support the Forest Service in creating programs around the communities of our national forest, which is the first or second biggest tourism attraction in Puerto Rico. But when we started seeing the money that was generating the forest was leaving Puerto Rico in major, like 70-something% of the instances, and what stayed in a small group of operators that had the capacity to build the system, to play the system. And when I say play, it's just get the right insurance, get quotes for insurance, being able to do the whole process, and the government to be able to participate. So that's an entry problem, and that's also that also needs to be dealt with, right? When the process is so complicated that only a few can be able to do it, then there's a problem. So yes, we've been shifting the conversation to writing laws that can literally bills that giving it to representatives around how to enable community-based tourism in order for all those communities that are around the forest to be able to create and receive the benefits of and the revenue that is leaving the forest. So hey, this is what we've been doing. I've been doing now for a year in this new position, but it's just like a deja vu, like an over deja vu of my probably 2 decades of being in this industry. And it gets better because I see myself grown in the industry. As I see myself grow, and I say, okay, so now you're a voice in this space, and I take myself accountable to be able to create a difference in this space. So even it comes through hiring. We are in charge of the type of entertainment that happens in a portal, the diversity that we're including now. And I have received fronts for like, oh, why are you including this type of entertainer? I'm like, why not? And it could be LGBTQ. It could be conversations around that in more conservative spaces. It's just it requires a lot of like breaking barriers ourselves also, and being put on the spot. And it's like you don't like it. You are the problem. It's not us, right? So that I just wanted to chime in a little bit of what I'm seeing, and thank you for this space because it's very much necessary.
Thank you, Carmen. A quick show of hands, who's going to be at Parallel 18 for our roundtable in less than 3 hours? All right, so we'll be able to talk more about that community impact in a bit. We'll have some time for that. Levi put a little bit about what they do there. Levi, any last thoughts about the topics and how you see this stuff?
Well, first of all, thank you for putting this on. It's great to hear everybody else's perspective. One of the biggest things with Wakewear is I really want to try to foster that environment for that everybody feels welcome and everybody is able to tell their story. And I feel that there's a lot of times when I looked around, there's not a whole lot of folks that don't look like me being represented, and especially I see in the gender nonconforming and whatnot. That I think it's time that everybody wants to travel, and our world's going to be better. My experience in the Navy gave me the opportunity to travel and to actually experience other cultures, and it really changed my life. And I think that's when we get to travel and we get to find out that others are, very similar to us. They're different but very similar. And at the end of the day, we all want to be, we all want to feel welcome. We all want to feel accepted and seen. And that's what I envision with my company. Of trying to help foster, and that's just my deal. So
thank you, Levi. Thank you to everybody, speakers, attendees. The good news is I believe that Amanda and CTO want to do more of these together. So I know we're a little late, but with some final words, I want to invite my colleague Amanda back.
Thank you very much, Roni, and thank you to all of the speakers that really shared their expertise, Brian, Maureen, and Omar for sharing such a compelling story, and your own effort to make travel to Jamaica more inclusive. And of course, we heard from Jessica, who shared, from her Hispanic heritage, I guess, linking as well her passion for food. And then we had some other issues ventilated, including for destination management organizations or the public sector? How can you make your marketing more inclusive to the various types of markets that can come to the region, you know, whether people of color, whether from the LGBTQI community, whether persons with disabilities, at the level of the private sector? How can you pay more attention to menu planning, persons with various types of sensitivities? And what infrastructure is required to ensure accessible spaces, accessible for persons with disabilities, both in terms of staff and employees? And lastly, we touched on inclusivity from the context of marginalized communities, indigenous communities. How can they contribute to product diversification, providing a unique experience in the destination? And we heard, for example, of the indigenous community, the Maroon community of Jamaica. I know they offer such a rich, immersive experience into their lifestyle and culture. And I know firsthand that RIV, the Rastafari indigenous community of Jamaica, they are one of the #1 visited cruise tourism experience, both in terms of cruise and stay over arrivals. I've had the opportunity to experience it firsthand. And it's these types of initiatives that sort of create that unique, authentic experience that visitors really are searching for. So, you know, a heartfelt thanks to Roni and his team at Travel Unity for the work that they're doing to bring awareness to this topic. I'm really happy we were able to collaborate for this initial dialogue. And I think this is what is needed to create an awareness. And I think it will help each of us to just adhere to the age-old adage, do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. The path really has to be equitable, prosperity, fairness, inclusion, to meet the needs of host communities, but certainly for the new travelers seeking to live, work, and play beyond borders. And that is one of the themes that we discussed at the World Tourism Day Forum. Not that everybody was able to join, but again, we are committed to continuing this dialogue to ensure product diversity, but also that the region is really welcoming to visitors, to employees coming into the industry in spite of their background, lifestyle, and disability. So thank you all for joining. Have a great day, and in your organizations as well as in your own life, just see how you can be that voice of reason, be that voice of inclusion and fairness as it relates to the Caribbean, or in the Caribbean tourism context. We really championing DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amanda. And I did drop in the chat the CTO Caribbean World Tourism Day Forum for those who weren't able to join us last week. Looking forward to more of these discussions, looking forward to seeing folks in person in a few hours. Thanks again. Hope you have a great rest of the day and beyond.